requirement in the review and approval process for the facility plan. And first off, does everybody sign the sign-in sheet? We need as many warm bodies as we can get on this. Convince them that we actually did something. So, I'll run through this pretty quick, like, unless anybody wants to really go into the nitty gritty. But generally speaking, a facilities plan is just what it says. It's you know, you identify a need for something in a community, and particularly relates to sewer in this case. And say, okay, what's your, you know, what are you going to do to fix the problem? And you go through a process of defining the problem, so to speak, and then coming up with projections for what's going to happen in the future, and then looking at alternative ways to deal with that, and go through a pretty formal process of looking at cost and looking at the impacts, a brief environmental review is part of it, and you know, then you know, what it's going to cost and how long it's going to take, and so on and so forth, and write that all down in this report, and then send it to Frankfurt, and they take their sweet time reviewing it, but they eventually review it and come back with some comments. At some point, before they'll finish the review, we have to do a public presentation of the plan. It has to be advertised on it. So that's what tonight is for, is for that purpose. And if we get the graphics back, we will.
I'm connected to do you know what the Wi-Fi password is here? Because I have my phone hotspot on there, and that's what it's not loading at.
I can tell you for
because I'm connected to the server. I was trying to save this on the desktop in case it decides to dislike me later. Is it City Hall?
good. Well, that's good for wastewater.
You can't connect to ours.
There's one bar. I mean, I don't think that
Try
would.
this. Dollar sign capital.
Dollar sign. I believe it did. Oh. Nice. Alright. Now that I'm on more predictable Wi-Fi, I don't have to worry about this. Okay.
Can you scroll down to the executive summary part of it? Yeah, back up.
There you go.
So we define the problem, we look at alternatives, we figure out how to address it with those alternatives. Then we look at what's it going to cost, and how are we going to pay for it, and what approvals are needed, and then we'll stick a schedule in there. I think the next page was the schedule. I don't know how far out of date we are on that at this point. But, yeah, we're okay. We're okay. We're a little bit behind. The interim plant that's talked about there is out to bid right now, so that construction probably moves up into 2006. We're in the design phase of the permanent plant right now, so I think the important part there is the bottom and where we end up. And that has us finishing up in late 2028 permanent plant. Hopefully we can stay on that schedule. First thing, statement of purpose. That's no mystery. I mean, Guthrie has a plant that was built in 1980, I believe, right now. That is, you know, it served the city well for the time, but recent growth has caused it to be overloaded, and we needed to do something to increase the capacity. So, you know, that's pretty straightforward. So we look at the planning area and what's likely to happen, and you know what we think the future holds for it. That usually requires a little. If you go to the Census Bureau and you go to the folks that do the projections about what's going to happen in rural communities, they invariably predict decline, because that's what has happened over the last 20 or 30 years. They just project that into the future. They never see the last few years and where things are headed. So we take that, you know, we acknowledge that, but then don't use those figures and project some modest level of growth, and that's what we've done in this case. And in Guthrie's case, that growth could be modest or it could be pretty dramatic, depending on what actually comes to fruition here. But that's what we did with the facilities planning process. This is what you call a planning area. You have to define that, and the green is essentially the city limits and what's served by sewer now in Guthrie. The pink is unserved areas that is still within the planning area. And you'll notice there's, you know, the tiny town area, and then, you know, over to the east. But we also include part of Tennessee down there, because Guthrie has some sewer service in Tennessee right now, and reached an agreement with Clarksville, a couple of years ago, I guess, to say, hey, you know, we're just going to let you all have this territory in Tennessee to serve. So we included that in, and you know, made some projections for that. The challenge with a rural community like Guthrie is that you can project all you want to, and one entity like Novellus changes everything, you know, because who would have predicted that 10 years ago, you know, so. That's your sewer collection system right now, where it runs, and yeah, basically this was all built in the early 80s, with the exception of some of this out toward Town, and the spur that goes up there and serves Novellus, and maybe a little bit to the east back there that picks up some of the stuff out by what used to be the old Barcola plant, that sort of thing. You know, they want to look at floodplain, you know, what can develop, what's the lay of the land, so on and so forth. So there are a bunch of exhibits that talk about that in there as well.
Floodplains.
Yeah, 100-year floodplain. You know, it's no surprise that Guthrie has some floodplain area in it. And we look at zoning, this map's actually outdated. There's a more current version over there, but that's what's online, so we grabbed that and stuck it in there. It's not dramatically different. Then, you know, a bunch of other stuff that you're just kind of required to address in this. The idea here is to come up with population projections, which we did. And, you know, we show a fairly modest growth in Guthrie. It's interesting to me that if you look at Guthrie's historical population, it peaked in 2000, but then started picking, you know, we anticipated to pick up again in 2030 and move forward. Todd County's bottomed out in 2000 and has grown since then. So I don't know what explains that, but that's, I thought that was interesting. Then, you know, the big driver, of course, on this is industrial development. That's the thing that in a small community that can, you know, essentially like adding 1,000 people to the community overnight. So anyway, then we get into the environmental. We have to look at endangered species and all that sort of thing. That's all addressed in there. I won't go into that unless somebody just wants to talk about what's existing. Main thing they wanna know is how much excess flow are you getting in from rainwater, or infiltration and inflow. And Guthrie has a substantial amount, and we have to allow for that in the planning as well, so that's talked about in here, and that's just sort of a little.
Makes us sewer flows. It's interesting. Pretty hefty.
Well, they make you do a calculation, which in every one I've ever done, the calculation shows it to be excessive, which semantically, I don't know how it can be excessive if everybody's excessive, but that's their calculation. A little schematic, if you will, there, of how the system works. Basically, everything collects along Spring Creek, runs into the plant, we treat it, and it runs back into Spring Creek. This is a little schematic also of the existing plant in black, and then what I'm calling the interim plant, which we're building to buy us some time until the permanent plant gets built. We've actually got 4 potential phases to this. One we're in right now, which is what I call the emergency plant, which when the first flows got up as high as they were, we went out and rented a plant, brought it in, set it up, did this without any approval or whatever from the Division of Water, but explained to them, hey, you know, we can either get in trouble for violating that rule, or we can get in trouble for putting unclean water in the creek, and I'd rather get in trouble for violating that first rule than the second one. So that's in place right now. It gets used sporadically, I guess, as flows get up. This plant, this interim plant, will take us from a current rating of 310,000 gallons a day up to 403,000 gallons a day. And, you know, those seem like odd numbers, but you can expand the plant up to 30%, which is where the 403 comes from, without an approved facilities plan. And since a facilities plan takes such a long process to get through, and building the new plant is a long process, we're going to do this, buy some time, allow development to continue in Guthrie during that interim period, and then once the new plant's online, this gets decommissioned and hopefully sold to somebody. It'll be a benefit and have fairly substantial salvage value. So that's what we're planning on doing with the interim plant.
And the interim plant and the emergency plant are both package plants that are just brought in there temporary. I feel like that's if they're not forever.
Yeah, they just kind of sit on a slab out there and do their thing. Just keep going. We talked about the existing plant, but
This is all loading.
yeah, we get into a bunch of stuff here that how it all works and what the components of the existing plant are, and I don't think that's of great interest here. Just keep going here. We've got a lot of parameters about how the thing was designed and how it works. We're only on page 41 of 235, so we need
Permit conditions. I was gonna say,
we
what do
gotta
you want me
pick
to
up
stop
pace
at?
here.
This is all the compliance stuff.
Yeah, a lot goes into this.
Forecast of flows and
Okay,
base loads
now-
in the area.
I'm gonna just kind of jump to the answer here. The interim step takes us to 430,000 gallons a day. The first phase of the permanent plant, which is what we're talking about building right now, takes us to 1 million gallons a day, which we think will serve Guthrie for a long time. But we've also acquired enough land, and we're designing some components of the plant to accommodate 2 million gallons a day. So if we needed to expand again, it would be fairly easy to do it. We wouldn't have to go get more land. We wouldn't. But let me back up. Every time we do this, we allow for this, and by the time you get to actually building it, a lot of times the rules have changed, and you have to do things different than you planned anyway. But you got to plan for it. So we've tried to accommodate that. So you know, if we build it, once people move in, more industry, and we get to 1 million, we could go to 2 pretty readily on that site. And then, as y'all know where it is out there, if we needed more land, I think we could get more land too. So then we started looking at alternatives. This is, again, the way you do any planning process, but it's stipulated in the facilities planning process that you have to pick different alternatives and evaluate those. So we look, number one, always no action, don't do anything. And, that's clearly not a good option in our case because, we have needs, unmet needs. So we look at different processes. First one, we looked at a membrane type bioreactor plant, which is a fairly new technology in wastewater. Number 2, we looked at what's called an extended aeration oxidation ditch, which is essentially the process you have right now at the plant. And then number 3 is an activated sludge process, which is another fairly common thing that you look at. There's 100 ways to skin this cat, and you can't look at every one of them. And so you try to just pick, 3 reasonable ones and move through the process of evaluating those. They also want you to look at what they call regionalization, which is there anybody around you that could accept the wastewater from Guthrie and treat it and you not have to build a plant, or vice versa, could Guthrie build a little bit bigger plant and take on somebody else around here and get rid of some plants. And that's been a focus of the state for a number of years now. We looked at that. Clarksville has no interest whatsoever in taking wastewater from Guthrie, so that one was checked off the list in a hurry. Elkton, we talked to Elkton. Elkton's like, we're good. We got a plant, got capacity in it, so we're not really interested in participating. Trenton was a little more complicated. We talked to Trenton, and there was some level of discussion on that, and a lot of interest from the state in that. They wanted us to review that pretty thoroughly about whether that would be an option or not. So we did look at it, but at the end of the day, we said, not no, but probably not now would be the answer to that. So what we've done, going through here, we've allowed for the possibility of Trenton joining Guthrie at some point, but not counting on it. Keep going. This just talks about the plant component parts. We can go over here to this. No, well, that's just a schematic of the membrane plant. And that's the layout of the membrane plant. The old plant is the little tilted rectangle on the left there. And then the new property that we bought is where everything else is there. There's a TVA power line that runs through there. That we're not acquiring that property, but since you can't build on it, it provides some buffer. Kind of helped out in that regard.
This is a bunch of calculations, and this is a visual of every alternative.
Yeah, so just let's move on through this. This is even not terribly interesting to engineers. I know it will be interesting to a public hearing.
Crosscut correspondence.
Yeah, then we have to reach out to all the different environmental entities, or kind of falls under the environmental envelope. Fish and Wildlife. We reach out to the Heritage Council. Are we endangering any species by doing this? Are we damaging any historical properties? Corps of Engineers, floodplain, so on and so forth. So we look at all that, and then we look at the big question. Usually in these things, how are you going to pay for it? We'll get to that a little later. So, just keep going here.
Sources and use of funds.
So,
Documentation.
well, go back to the one before that. And keep Yeah. At the end of the day, when we came up with our cost estimates and went through and picked something, we settled on the oxidation ditch type plant, which is what you have now. It's familiar and it's worked well for Guthrie. It's not the absolute cheapest in terms of building it. I think our cost estimate for that one was 25 something. The activated sludge is maybe a couple $100,000 less than that, but the oxidation ditch is less to operate over time, and they want you to make your decision on a 20-year life cycle cost. So the oxidation ditch won out on the 20-year life cycle cost. So what we're doing, we got a budget of $733,000 for the temporary plant, 2.2, nearly 3 for the interim plant, 25 something for the permanent. Then we're going to have to spend a little bit of money on collection system. We got some money budgeted for that. And then once we get finished with all that, we got to do a little study and assessment of how do we do? Did we solve the problem? So bottom line, we said, okay, it's going to cost, we're going to budget $31 million. Now that's a guess. There's no guarantee to that. We hope we're pretty close, but we don't know till we open bids what something really costs. So the going down here, we've got current rates shown in here. In Guthrie, 4,000 gallons is a fairly typical residential user. In Guthrie, a 4,000 gallon user pays what, $58? Is that what that would work out to there for their sewer bill? Now, most people, they get what they call their water bill, and they don't realize that that's water and sewer and gas and taxes and all kinds of stuff lumped into that. So when you start talking about the bills going up by 10%, a lot of times they say, well, my bill's $100, so it's going up $10. Well, that's not true. It's just in this case, it would just be the sewer component of it that's going up. If we have to do that, and just keep going over here. We don't need that. That just has to be in there, the water. Then the next thing we do is we take the city books basically and say, what's your budget for operation of the water and sewer department, or the sewer department in this case. We looked at fiscal year ending in 2025, what it was. Okay, what's the project only going to do to that? Essentially, it affects the expenses. We end up with increased expenses at the end of that period. The big number in most of these things, let me say, I've never done a facilities plan presentation yet where I didn't get to the rate part of it, and I dreaded talking about it because most of the time when we do these, we're dealing with a community that's got an old plant that's been paid off for a long time. They have no debt service component in their budget right now, but that's going to jump up dramatically because they have to borrow a lot of money. In Guthrie's case, that's not it. Guthrie got an enormous grant, and actually out of that $31 million, none of that is anticipated to be debt right now. It's 28 from a state line item budget grant, and then the other 3 is from other grant sources. So if that works out, and I mean the 28's already there, the 3 is the only thing that's in the application process right now. If that works out, and if our cost estimates are right or high, there's no debt service component on the budget. Now there will be an increased cost to operate the new plant, so we can't get around that. You can't operate a 1 million gallon plant for the same price you operate an old 310,000 gallon plant. So there will be an increase in that regard, most likely. And if the plant comes in over budget, very likely we'll have to borrow money to cover that. So there could be a debt service component going forward. But right now, we don't anticipate it. But like I say, most of these I go in and I say, your sewer rates are gonna double, or your sewer rate, in some cases, I think we've been up to about 250%. That's not the case in Guthrie.
In this case, they're earning interest off of the money that they.
Well, they are a little bit, not as much. We got a line item appropriation for the gas project back 4 years ago now, and that was kind of the first time that it happened in a long time in Kentucky. And when we got the appropriation, I say we, Priya got the appropriation, it just showed up in the form of a check. Well, we put that in the bank, started drawing interest on it, so that grew substantially. But this time around, it says, no, we're not going to do that way. We're going to piece it out to you a little bit at a time. So we're making a little bit of interest on it, given that we get it in chunks instead of one big piece. But the interest is not a tremendous amount.
Orientation, this is the KVDS permit.
Okay, I'm missing a sheet there.
What?
There's a discussion somewhere about the rate impact. Yeah, okay, it's down there. What we've tried to do to come up with the rate impact is, you know, the critical time when you build one of these things is when you go from operating that old plant to going to operating the new plant. And generally speaking, it doesn't get you any new revenue day one when you put it in service. So you have a period of time there that it could be kind of a difficult situation. So what we said is that we're going to build this interim plant, and if none of it is utilized by the time we get the permanent plant built, and we have to take on these increased O&M costs, then our estimated rate increase will be 37%. Now, that's not going to be the case because we're already over the capacity of the old plant. We're going to be somewhere higher than that. If it's 50%, utilized, then that rate increase number drops down to 9%. And if it's 100% utilized, there doesn't need to be a rate increase. So, right now, it looks reasonable that we would anticipate, yeah, a very modest, if any, rate increase as a result of implementation of this. So, that's.
KVDS permit.
No, I don't want to go through any of that unless you all just want me to. There's another 100 or so pages of appendices and boilerplate and so on and so forth. So this is under review at the state. They hopefully approve this as submitted. That allows them then to approve the design of the permanent plant. We build the permanent plant sometime toward the end of 2028. We hope to have the permanent plant in service, and then after that we got to do a little work on the collection system. But generally speaking, that's where we are, where we're headed. So that's 30 minutes. I'll take that. Anybody
These are
have
the
any
appendices if anyone wants to see
questions
what's
or
in it.
comments or criticisms?
How much do you think it'll affect manpower over there?
At the plant?
Yeah.
Well, the plant, I don't think the plant will take any more people to operate it than currently work there. Now, if flow gets up, if it's a $1 million a day plant, if flow gets up to, 6,000, 7,000, 100,000 gallons a day, which is roughly double where you're at now, then maybe. But if you do, then you'll have a lot more revenue coming in off of it. So, that shouldn't be a big problem to deal with.
And that won't be anything that would happen like immediately upon opening.
It'll take some time for you.
Well, we don't think so, but, I mean, if Tom calls up and says, hey, we got another phase out here we wanna build.
Surprise, it's already built.
It could happen, it could
Please
happen.
wait till it's done.
Yeah,
Be nice.
never know.
Okay,
Fantastic.
I think we've fulfilled our obligation for a public hearing.
Call for a round of applause, I think.